All right, there we go. Let's try this again. This is my third shot at this, or maybe fourth. Uh, Usually I just make a video and go with it, but first time my battery was dying, the second time the camera wouldn't start, third time I got a minute in and my kids started screaming at each other, so I'll do my best to make a quick video for what it's worth. I wanted to say make mountains out of molehills. I was just working in my room and doing some things, and a thought occurred to me that, you know, that old saying of make mountains out of molehills, or don't make mountains out of molehills, rather. And I intertwined it with my video I had just made, which was about basically duality and how there are two sides to every coin, but really it's subjective, like hot and cold. They're only comparative to your state of whether you're warm or cold, and even that's comparative to the universal state of, what is heat. It doesn't matter. The dualism quite often is a human construct, but it's something we live with. Just like you could be happy, you could be sad, you could be angry, you could be elated. There are several different sides to the coin which may not actually be opposites, but seem opposite in contrast. So what I thought about was, whenever there's a saying or a quote or something that people have used for a long time, there should be an opposite, a dual to it, a dual side to it. And so don't make mountains out of molehills is obviously a metaphor that we know very well, and it means don't make a big deal out of small shit. Don't sweat the small stuff. Let it go. It's not a big deal. And the contrast to this is that what is a big deal? For example, a person may say, don't worry about whether or not you can find the answers to these questions. Just worry about your career. And one way of thinking, that would be the exact polar opposite of what another person may think to do. They would say career doesn't mean anything. Finding yourself is most important. It's all perspective, but dualism in a sense it means being able to look at the opposite side of everything. It's something that I've been training myself to do for a long time. Really only over the last 3-4 years I've spent trying to, whenever I dislike something or disagree with something, I try to put myself in that perspective, in that place. If another person is strongly disagreeing and opposed to me or to something I believe, or we have a disagreement or a fight, I always try to put myself in their shoes. And that's empathy, but sympathy, empathy, however you want to put it. Of course, sympathy is knowing because you've been there, and empathy is more like just feeling sorry for another person because of their situation. But the opposite of making mountains, or to say make mountains out of molehills, would mean to take the smallest things in life that may seem trivial and really poke and prod at them to see what they're worth. There are people out there who are screaming about one thing or another that may or may not be true. Let's say, whether it be conspiracies or religious beliefs or political standpoints. They have their individual viewpoint that they think is correct. And there's always an opposite to that. There's always an opposite. So while one side thinks that they're correct and the other side thinks they're correct, it's obvious that there's something to each side that's beneficial. That in human nature there are no accidents, and not everything is being controlled, not all the buttons are being pushed. Many of them are just, it's a system in place. So to look at these little things, or the things that we once thought trivial in our personal lives, and realize that, for example, if we're nitpicking about something small that, maybe it's just the litter in your neighborhood. Maybe you write a little thing to the community paper, and you start a little spat about how, there's litter around, and somebody says, you could be spending that energy worrying about something bigger, such as wars in the Middle East or genocide in other countries. And still another person could come and say, well, you should put your energy into nuclear, opposing nuclear power. Whereas another person is saying, no, you should completely support nuclear power because it could pull us out. And all of these viewpoints combined are what reveal a little bit of truth that kind of wisps out of it. If 99% of the population believes something, and the 1% thinks that they have it figured out, and I'm not talking about the 1% with money, I'm just saying, if by ratio 1% of the people think that a particular reality of history is true, then that doesn't necessarily give it very much weight. It doesn't mean they're wrong. And an example would be the 6,000-year-old creationists, the people that believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. There are a lot of them out there. I don't know how many, but many Christians would say, well, look at how many Christians there are. There's 72% in the U.S., but worldwide I think it's only like 16%, so it's much lower, that are specifically Christian, not Catholic, and it becomes divided much more widely, and you see that there are many different opinions, many different ideas of what's true, but ultimately some truth surfaces out of that. The truth that comes out of all the religions is that there's a common thread, a mythology that we all share, a story of who we are and what we yearn for. And when you look deeper and you see the depth of it, and you see the meaning behind it, it's so much more empowering than completely believing it literally or rejecting it as being just drivel and garbage, as I did when I was younger. I mean, I have thrown a Bible out of a motel window. I remember down on the highway once, it was a Gideon's Bible, and little memories of that, the things how I felt about religion in general, and it wasn't because I didn't try, it was, well, I definitely didn't try to be religious, but I tried to read into the texts and see the meaning. I was too young, I was too dumb. It's only as you grow and experience the stories that all of a sudden, those molehills become mountains. The questions that seemed small before, you can visit with renewed vigor and interest, and that in itself is something that we have to be open to. And that's why I would say, don't define anything as a mountain or a molehill, but rather see everything as a potential. A little ball of electricity that can grow or disappear depending on your perspective of it, but to try to remember to not base what we consider to be important or not important on only our subjective experience. In a lot of regards it is important. We can't find, if we can't fight genocide, to kind of explain where I was going with that, if we can't fight genocide in another country, then we can act locally. They say think globally, act locally, and that's very important. Both people are right in that sense. One person wants to help others in another country, another person wants to help their local community, one person wants to stop people from being killed, another person just wants to pick up garbage on the road. But all of these are important parts. And I kind of like to better define the nuclear thing when I mentioned it. Somebody asked me once, why don't you talk more about, the dangers of nuclear and how we've got to abolish it. And I said, I had to be honest and say I support nuclear power for a short-term solution to the problems that we face, merely because the deaths per year from nuclear accidents are like a 3 or 4 compared to like hundreds in coal per like however million. I can't remember the numbers, but it's significantly lower. The only danger is for meltdown or from the storage, long-term storage. However, when you look a little deeper and you see that thorium reactors may solve this problem, thorium has a much shorter half-life. There's certain reactors now that can burn old rods that have already been used, and the ones that are right now in storage. Point being that once you get a full picture of the information in life about certain subjects, then you start to say there may be something to this, or there may not be something to this, and then we can weigh our options. So it's the collective of all people working towards the things that they find to be important that I think define who we are as a people, not what a few people think that they know on top of everyone else. And this happens in the truther world. I don't talk about this anymore because I don't want anybody to be offended, but it's not because I don't want people to be offended, it's because I just have no time for those who want to assume that I am a shill, who could sit and listen to an entire video and see my channel and yet still think I'm a paid government informant merely because I'm expressing that I don't believe everything is a hoax or everything is faked. You know, there's people who believe that everything they see on the media. Then there's people who believe some of it and realize the stories are true, but the details may be wrong, or that there may be more to it in the depth of it. And then there's people that just flat out believe that everything is a manufactured issue, like every single newscast and everything, as if the world doesn't really suffer any real ailments. They're all man-made. And in a way they are, but not manufactured by a few. There's not a panel of people deciding what goes in the media. It's more like the media jumps on whichever story is going to get them the best views. This is just simple business, you know. But what I've seen is that we give people more power than they really have by believing that everything's in control. It's almost like we would rather have, you know, if a pirate hijacked our ship, it's almost like we would rather have a pirate, rather think a pirate is still steering the ship, even though our captain's dead, than to believe that there is no pilot, there is no captain, and the ship's going to crash. I think the thing is to realize that the ocean is vast and the chances of the ship crashing are nil, because everything goes on, whether or not we survive as humans. So we just got to make the best out of it and try to make molehills and mountains into mountains and molehills and see where we go with it.